Hello friends, and welcome to another episode of Cooking with Colbath. Again, my name is Julie Colbath. I'm the coordinator of Civic Engagement in the Office of Student Life here at UM-Dearborn. I'm going to quickly apologize. I started my dishwasher probably like an hour ago, so if you hear it in the background, I'm very sorry. Today we will be making a couple different things. The first and primary one is split pea soup. So at the pantry right now, which is exciting, right? We've been starting to get more lentils, which is always great, right? Lentils are a great source of protein, can be utilized in a lot of different ways. But we also have split peas, green and yellow. So I grabbed some green ones, and we're going to be utilizing the recipe that's on the back of the bag. And I've been really interested lately in like recipes that are on the product, right? Because you hopefully it'll be good if they're willing to put it on there. I liked this recipe. I haven't tried it, but I liked that it was super simple. I think a lot of the times, especially if you're making split pea soup, generally, at least with green split peas, they use ham. I don't often eat ham, don't really have it on hand, and so a lot of the recipes that I saw online used a ham bone or used ham. If you have extra ham, right, Easter was a couple of days ago, so if you celebrate Easter, one of the traditional things that people eat on Easter might be ham. Feel free to utilize it. So it's kind of funny, and it sort of was unintentional. The other thing that we're making is egg salad. And so again, if you do celebrate Easter, if you are dyeing eggs or eating like deviled eggs or anything, and you have leftover hard-boiled eggs, this is a great way to use them up. Okay, so for this split pea soup, again, super easy. We're going to use some oil. So it calls for olive oil. It calls for, sorry, I was cutting up onions, and so I feel like I'm a little bit sniffly now. 2 large yellow onions chopped. So I already chopped them, right? We've done onions on the show before. Didn't think you needed to watch me do it again. 2 cups of these green split peas. So you'll want to rinse them and sort them. Sometimes, especially with like split peas and lentils and dried beans, there's a chance that there could be like tiny rocks that were just like collected with it right when they were harvested. You just want to rinse it, sort of sort through them, see if there's anything that you just need to pick out. So I've already rinsed those. And then it calls for 5 cups of water, which you can substitute chicken broth if you want, or vegetable broth or beef broth. I'm going to use, I have a carton of chicken broth, so that'll end up being 4 cups. And then I'm just going to add an extra cup of water to get to our 5 cups. And then it calls for a tablespoon of lemon juice. I don't know necessarily how important that is. I have been watching a lot of like cooking competition shows, right? And so I don't know if that's like for an element of acidity, right? Bring a little bit of acid to the flavor, right? If you don't have it, I don't think it's going to be a huge deal. So what we're going to do, basically, we're going to saute these onions before we add the broth and the split peas, and then we're just going to let it simmer for like 20 minutes. So again, you don't need to. We'll very quickly make our egg salad, but then you don't need to like watch me watch the pan. So you probably will just experience a few seconds, and then it'll magically be done. Once it's simmered for 20 minutes, and I was looking up a few different recipes, and some of them simmer for longer, so there is a chance, right, that it might need more time. But what we're going to do is we're going to take half of it out of the pan, and we're going to blend it, so that'll help thicken up the soup, so it's not just like broth and a bunch of split peas that haven't necessarily softened and like broken. So sometimes, right, I made black bean soup last week, and if you mash the black beans, it really just releases some like starches, which help thicken the soup. So we will get started. Let me reorient you a tiny bit. Sorry again for the glare. The pros and cons of sunlight, right? So I'm gonna turn my fan on. So it says medium high heat. We'll add our oil. I'm gonna see how to move this. Hold on. I don't think that helped at all. So it calls for a tablespoon. As always, I just kind of pour some in my pan. Stir in onions and salt and cook until the onions soften, which will probably be about 2 minutes. So it doesn't have like a specific amount of salt. Oh, the glare's real bad. So I'm just gonna sprinkle some in. You can always add salt, but it's hard to take it away, right? So when I try it at the end, I might season it with more salt. Seems worse. There's no winning. Okay, so the oil's in there. I'm gonna take my 2 onions. I just threw them in the pot. Doesn't matter what kind of, oh my gosh. What kind of spoon you use. This is just the one I grabbed on my little utensil caddy. So we're gonna set a timer for 2 minutes. Just to see, right, like if the onions actually soften in that amount of time. You'll be able to tell they get a little bit more translucent, start to break down. Sometimes they can get a little bit brown. It's not a bad thing. Or you can like stab the onion with a fork to see if it softens. They'll also soften as they're simmering in the liquid, right? So you don't need to get them like crazy done. They just needed to start to soften. Again, it did say to salt, so I'm just gonna, my little salt shaker, I'm just gonna pour some salt in. And again, also one of the things that I am hearing a lot in my cooking competition shows, just taste as you go, right? You don't want to add too much salt, too much pepper, and then it gets to be like inedible, right? Because it's just too salty. All right, you're gonna want to make sure, right, you have a pot that's big enough. No idea how big this pot is, maybe 5 quarts. Sounds right. So that, you'll have 5 cups of liquid, you'll have 2 cups of split peas, which will obviously like go into the liquid, but you just want to make sure that it's not like boiling over at any point. If y'all have any good, that's our 2 minutes. If y'all have any good ways to utilize green split peas or yellow split peas, please feel free to throw them in the chat as it's live streaming, or in the comments if you're watching this afterwards. As always, I think it's nice when we're able to share recipes, and especially things like split peas might not be as common in other people's pantries as they are in yours. So it's nice to have a recipe to help people know what to do with things that they haven't really encountered. All right. So these are starting to get translucent. I would show you, but with the glare, And with my camera, it probably won't really show up. And like our timer said, it's been about 2 minutes. So what I'm going to do, add the peas and the water. So I'm going to add, right again, this is an extra cup, so we need 5 cups of liquid. This is only 4 cups. I'm going to add my 1 cup of water and my 4 cups of chicken broth. Sometimes I really hate, like, I don't know if you saw it splashing, this wonderful glare. But coming out of this container, it's not very smooth. So it's splashing a little bit. So again, you can use vegetable broth, beef broth, or you can just use water. I think broth is nice because it'll give it a little bit of a richer flavor. But if you don't have it, it's nice that this is just basic water if you want. Okay, so again, these are our 2 cups of split peas. Ooh, I rinsed them earlier and now they are stuck together. So don't rinse them too early. They will come apart, but I let them sit, which was not, it was just more of a convenience thing for me. They just kind of stuck together, but all right. So it says we're going to bring it to a boil and then we're going to dial down the heat and simmer for 20 minutes. So I'm just trying to break apart my chunk. Again, don't do what I did, like rinse them right before you're going to use them. I didn't realize that they would stick together, but it's probably right when I rinsed it, some of the starches that might have like released. Not a big deal, because they will. They're coming apart. So I'm just trying to help that process. So while we're waiting for it to boil, which shouldn't take too long, we can make our egg salad. So I don't know if egg salad is something that you commonly eat. I don't eat it like too often, but I do enjoy egg salad. I think eggs are a super nice, cheap source of protein and other nutrients. And so I really enjoy eating eggs. I think we've hard boiled them before, I'm pretty sure, on a past episode. So sorry, I'm just trying to break these still a little bit. I've already hard boiled them and peeled them and let them cool. So again, while we're waiting for this to boil, we can just start on our egg salad. It sounds really nice too because like it's super basic. So we've got hard-boiled eggs and at like the bare minimum, right? Like mayo, mustard, salt, and pepper. I like to add, and it's just because of what I grew up eating, I like onions and celery in mine for a little bit of crunch. The recipe that I've found, because a lot of times I don't necessarily go off of a recipe, called for dill, like pickle relish. I didn't have relish, so I just got a couple pickles. So I have like pickled chips. So the first thing, I used like a little bit of the onion from when I chopped for the soup, so we don't have to chop it again. So we'll just chop the celery quick. I'm pretty sure we've already gone over celery, but I couldn't quite remember. It's been a little while. So we want it finely chopped. So I took a stalk of celery and I washed it. I cut off the top, and so I'm going to cut it in half. Right, so I've created 2 halves, and then I'm going to cut the halves into like a few different pieces. So I just cut it into thirds. So the recipe that I found, I halved it. So we only need 2 tablespoons. So this, I'm just going to try cutting like a half because I feel like we might get to be enough. So you want to clump them together, and then you'll want to really finely slice it so you don't get like crazy big chunks in your egg salad. Always be careful as you're getting to the end of your cuts so that you don't cut yourself. Alright. Some of this is a little bit stringy. So that was about 1 tablespoon. So we'll go ahead and cut up the other one. So again, this was a half that we put into thirds. Group them together. And then we do some very small, thin slices. Alright, I'm keeping an eye on my soup still, not boiling yet. So that's the tricky thing sometimes, right, is you're like, oh, like I'm going to do this, this says 2 minutes, and then I'm going to add this, and then it says 20 minutes, but then sometimes there's some sneaky steps that take longer than you would expect. Alright, so we've got 2 tablespoons of celery. I'm just going to scoop my celery over so we can chop our eggs. So I've probably talked about this before. This is the sharp end of my knife, and this is like just the top, right? So you don't want to necessarily scrape the sharp end across your board because then it'll dull your knife. So I flip it over so that I'm scooting things across my board with the top so I'm not dulling the blade. Alright, cool. So again, I've already hard boiled my eggs. I let them sit overnight. I peeled them, and they're not the most, some of them are not the most perfect, but it's cool. So I have 6 here. So if you have an egg slicer, so I'm just going to dump this little bit of water. I had rinsed my eggs off after I peeled them so that any like random little shells would come off. If you have an egg slicer, you can easily use that. I'm just going to cut them. So let me try to move these so you can see better. So the size of your eggs just kind of depends on your preference. So I'm just going to cut them in half so that we can create a flat edge. And then I'm just going to kind of do some dicing. So I'm going to cut some lengthwise and then cut 90 degrees. And so if you want, this is about how big they are, right? Maybe half an inch. It doesn't have to be exact. If you want it smaller, dice it smaller. If you like larger chunks, dice it bigger. Alright, eggs are super easy to cut. So the way that I had hard-boiled them, I submerged them in cold water, and then I put them on the stove, brought it to a rolling boil, then turned off the heat, covered it, let it sit on the stove for 10 minutes. If you like yours a little bit more done, you can let it sit for longer. I think generally they recommend like 10 to 12 at least. So again, I'm I'm doing like 4 slices, and then that one was like 6 slices. I used to have an egg slicer, and I think in some of my moves, it got lost, which is not a big deal. Sometimes I feel like I can have too many kitchen gadgets. Alright. Just have a couple more eggs to do. I'm using a serrated knife. You can use a normal knife if you want. I just like serrated knife for this. Okay. There are lots of variations of egg salad. If you have a go-to recipe that you normally use, feel free to drop it. A lot of the ones that I was finding, right, they have like dill, fresh dill, or like fresh parsley. I don't often have that in my house, so it's not something that got added to mine. And I have, if you like it a little bit spicy, the website that I've pulled some recipes from before, called Budget Bites, she has a good like sriracha egg salad. So it's a nice sort of like different version of egg salad. Okay, so all of our eggs are chopped, so I'm going to put them in our bowl. And the nice thing, right, like you can put this on, like if you're making a salad with like a bunch of greens, you could put it on there. You could put it, obviously, like as a sandwich, so you can put it on bread, put it in a wrap, eat it with crackers, whatever you want. I'm going to rinse my hands. Alright, real quick, I'm going to stir our soup. So again, if it happens to you like it happened to me, where you rinse them and then you set them down for a little while and they clumped, it's, you cannot see that. They've all broken up, and so it's getting ready to boil. It's foaming a little bit on the top, which is probably some of the starch that was released in the peas. Okay, so it's starting to boil. So what we're going to do, dial down the heat and simmer for 20 minutes or until the peas are cooked. So, I don't even need I feel like it's always a toss-up if you need a lid or not. So I'm going to bring it to a simmer. So I turned the heat down very low. I'm going to set the timer for 20 minutes. We'll finish our egg salad. We'll take a tiny break, and then we'll come back when the soup's ready. Okay. I'm going to move. We don't need my cutting board anymore. I'm going to move it. Like I've mentioned before, you can put a wet paper towel underneath your cutting board so it doesn't move. Okay. Ideally, I should have gotten a bigger bowl. It's funny sometimes how in the bowl 6 eggs didn't look like it would take up that much space, and yet it does. So now we're just going to throw everything in there and mix it around. So those are our dill pickle relish, the celery that we chopped, some finely diced onions. A lot of the recipes call for green onions. I think you could easily substitute them for white onions. The recipe that I found called for red onions. I don't have red onions, so I just used my yellow onions. And this is a 1/4 cup of mayo and a tablespoon of mustard. Some recipes called for Dijon mustard. I'm not always a Dijon fan. I do have some in my fridge actually. And then you're just going to mix it all together until it's fully incorporated. You can add salt and pepper to taste. If you feel like it's too dry, add some more mayo. If you have Miracle Whip, I feel like we used Miracle Whip sometimes growing up. Miracle Whip is a little bit sweeter, so and I think like a little bit tangier, so it might just have a little bit of a different flavor. And then oftentimes it'll suggest that you let it sit in the fridge for a while before you eat it, just because then, the flavors start to develop a little bit more and mix together. So it didn't specify salt and pepper, if I didn't already mention that at all, like a certain amount. So I'm just going to sprinkle some, and then I'm going to grab my salt. And then I'll mix it around, and again, you can taste it now. And if you feel like it needs more of anything, too dry, add mayo, more salt or pepper, add that. If you want more onion or celery or pickle, feel free to do so. But again, it'll change, like the flavor will change a little bit as it sits. So it looks pretty good to me. I'm just going to try a little bit. Tastes good. A little bit of a strong mustard flavor. So if you don't love mustard, maybe cut down the flavor or like the amount just a little bit. So I'm going to put a lid on this. I'm going to put it in the fridge. And then I'll be able to eat an egg salad sandwich with my soup. Okay, so this is still simmering. It has 17 minutes left. So I am going to let it simmer, and I'll be back in just a second. Okay, welcome back. So I know it was only a few seconds for you, but I did let it simmer for the full 20 minutes, plus just a couple minutes while I was getting my other stuff together. So I turned it off and I took it off the heat. And so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna blend some of it. So let me reposition you quick. So here's our pot full of our soup. I got a couple clear bowls just so that you can kind of see what it looks like. So you're going to want to take about half of it and blend it. So what I'm going to do, it doesn't have to be accurate, right? So I'm just going to, it'll probably end up being a little bit more. This measuring cup has a capacity of 2 cups, but I wanted to be able to easily pour it into my blender, which I guess I could just put it straight into my blender, but that's fine too. So I'm just going to take and do like half of it into my bowl, half of it into my measuring cup. And so, like I mentioned, we're going to throw it in the blender, and I think this will just help like thicken it so it's not just broth with split peas. It's got a little bit of a thicker consistency. Alright, so that's all I'm going to add in there just because it's getting pretty full, and we're pretty close to the end on that anyway. Here, I'll just add a couple more of these, and then we can throw the rest of this into the blender. So let me grab this. This will be easier, probably would have been easier just to put it in at the beginning, but it's fine. So this is about half of our soup. We're just gonna pour it into our blender. If you have like a food processor too, that'll work, or the recipe also said you could use like a hand blender if that works. Or if you have an immersion blender, you can use that as well, right? And then you don't have to take much out of the pan. You can just plug it in, and then the immersion blender can just go straight into the soup. So there's just a little bit left in here that I'm going to pour. Okay. And when you're blending soup, you want to be careful because I don't know if you can see, but there's a lot of steam coming out. And especially if you have a glass blender, you know, once you turn on the blender and then it starts to mix, it can get really hot and that heat has nowhere to escape. So if you have a way to let the heat escape, that's great. If not, make sure that you like are blending it for a few seconds and then like having some of the air escape and then blending it again. So I'm going to move y'all. Sorry for my random countertops. Okay. I'm putting this on my blender. So we can move it this way. So this goes. My blender does have a little spout thing that I can lift up so that some heat can be released. This is going to be really loud. I'm sorry. So we're going to blend it until it's got like an even consistency. Doesn't need to happen for too long. So I kind of held this so that heat could escape, but then it wasn't splattering everywhere. So we'll check it. Yep, and so now it's basically just like puree. So I'm going to put this in the sink. We can move you back over. Okay. So then we're just going to pour this blended part of the soup back into the bowl. And as you can see, this makes quite a lot. So if you don't want so many servings, like you can cut this pretty easily in half. Seems like it would freeze pretty well since the ingredients are pretty simple. Okay, so this we'll grab our spoon just to mix it around. So now it's a little bit more, if you've ever had split pea soup, probably it looks a little bit more like you're used to, right, where there are like, it doesn't look as clear, right, as if it's just broth and split peas. So it's got a, you know, looks kind of creamy, has some of the whole split peas, has some of the whole onions still. So it did say to add some lemon, so I squeezed my lemon and have 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. And this also could be, I was looking at the differences between yellow split peas and green split peas. Green split peas can be a little bit sweeter, so I think this is just like an acidic element to help kind of break that like creaminess and sweetness. So we added our tablespoon of lemon. Again, if you don't have it, I don't think it'll be a, like make or break. And then instead of just using it with a little bit more salt. Ooh, it's hot. And that's it. We're done. So I think, you know, it was pretty easy. It's nice to have, like I mentioned last week, I made some black bean soup. I threw it in individual portions and then put it in the freezer so that I can have like a quick meal or a quick snack when I want. So I'm going to let this cool, and then I'm going to throw it in the fridge, and then I'll have some soup for lunch or for dinner for the next couple of days. If you like having different elements to your soup, I feel like this could be good with like some sort of white bean, right? Like a cannellini bean or a chickpea, or you could add like some diced carrots to, on the back of the yellow split pea recipe, yellow split pea bag, they had a recipe for yellow and yellow split pea soup with kale, and so that would be good. But right, like I mentioned, if you do have ham, there are plenty of recipes on the internet that utilize like the ham bone for flavor, and then you use chunks of ham in the soup itself. So that's all that I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining. If you have any suggestions on things to make in the future, please let us know. Hopefully we might be having some different guests come in for Cooking with Colbath, so it might not always be me, but they will still be teaching you how to make something awesome. Hope you all have a great day, enjoy the warmth, and we'll see y'all later.